You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 24th of December 2024 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to a special edition of The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Tom Edwards. This Christmas Eve, we're taking a look back at some of the biggest interviews from across Monocle Radio in the past 12 months. Coming up on today's programme, Oscar-winning Danish director Susanne Bier talks about her hit series, The Perfect Couple.
You want to kind of tell audience just so much that maybe they think they know, but also not more than they anticipate that they don't know. And it's that fine dance which is so exhilarating for a director.
Former FBI director turned crime fiction author James Comey discusses his novel Westport and the dangers of a new Donald Trump presidency.
It's like trying to communicate with a child. And that's hard for people to believe because the office itself carries with it this sense that it must be a person of gravitas. But to tell Donald Trump something important, you have to interrupt him because he wants to talk about what he wants to talk about, and it's about himself.
Lisa Jackson, the Vice President of Environment, Policy and Social Initiatives at Apple, reveals the tech giant's sustainable business practices.
We focus on climate change, and we focus on the impact of our company and our suppliers on climate change. Since 2018, we've run on 100% renewable energy. Every store, every office, every data center, those are all running on renewable energy because that's our first goal here, is to make sure our footprint is zero.
And multi-award-winning composer Hans Zimmer on how he wrote the score to one of the year's biggest films, Dune Part 2.
My 13-year-old teenage arrogance always went, why am I hearing an orchestra when I'm in space? Isn't that all wrong? So we built instruments.
All that right here on this special Christmas Eve edition of The Briefing with me, Tom Edwards. We begin with Susanne Bier, who's the first female director to win an Academy Award, a Golden Globe and an Emmy. Working across both film and television, Bier is a master at creating tense and glamorous thrillers, including The Night Manager and The Undoing. Her latest series, The Perfect Couple, is a whodunit set in affluent Nantucket. It features an incredible cast that includes Nicole Kidman, Liv Schreiber and Isabel Adjani. Monocle's Fernando Augusto Pacheco spoke to Susanne in London, where she was attending the show's premiere.
Am I under arrest, or can I go get something to eat?
They're rich. Kill someone and get away with it, Rich.
We are the perfect family.
What drew me to it was, in a way, for me as a director, it was the potential of doing something fun and light in English, because most of the English language stuff I've done, I mean, it's been very thriller-driven, but it's been a little bit more serious. My sort of biggest home run is a comedy, is a Danish comedy. And so I was like, okay, I want to do that in English. And I thought the combination of who did it and something fun and light was just irresistible.
How much did you knew about that world in Nantucket, which I felt like I was transported to that place? I kind of want to go, in a way, but how much did you knew about that?
I did not know a lot about it. And at first I was also slightly hesitant. I actually said no first time round because I didn't know a lot about it. But then I spoke with people who really knows the world very well. And I kind of felt, okay, I understand this. I understand what kind of wealth that is and how does that work and what kind of privilege that comes with that wealth, because they are not all the same. And one of the things I dislike when portraying wealthy people is when it becomes generic. It always needs to be very specific. For example, the bedroom, Greer and Tag's bedroom, we had to redress it a few times because I came and I looked at it and I felt, okay, this is generic. I don't like that. It needs to be, they need to have real taste. They need to actually maybe know what kind of paintings are good or bad paintings, and let's get some of those in here, so that you have all the correct texture, but still it needs to be personally specific. And I think we did that.
Let's talk about Nicole Kidman's character. Again, another one of my surprises. I thought she was going to be very icy, but no, she's very connected to her sons. Do you know what I mean? She's quite an interesting character.
Well, her iciness is an acquired iciness which she carries on the surface. It's an iciness which is there because, first of all, maybe it's been necessary, but also it's a kind of convenient shield. But underneath her iciness, she's everything but icy.
Yes.
I mean, she looks the part. I mean, she looks like this magnificent creature of elegance and restraint. But we quite quickly get to understand that that is actually not who she really is. And then we spend a long time not knowing who she is.
Absolutely. How was it to work with Nicole again after the amazing success of The Undoing, which was another incredible series? As I said in the beginning, very different tone to that one.
It was really fun, and we were both very excited about doing something together with a different tone. She was really enjoying the comedic aspects of her part because, you know, I think in a way everything emotional, everything kind of forceful comes to her. It's like, it just comes to her like that. You know, comedy is a different, it's like a different science in a way. And it takes that sort of precision and that sort of thing. But we really had fun with it.
And it's not just Nicole. I mean, the supporting cast is incredible. And I have to say, I love that Isabelle Adjani is in there. I didn't know. And I was like, oh, wow. She's one of my kind of acting heroes. How was it to cast her? And
I mean, that was like a real honor. That was
Wow.
like a real honor. And I think it was really interesting because when she came to set, all the actors were like, whoa. And all the guys were like, you know, I had a poster of her for 15
Yes.
years in my bedroom. And so it's this sort of icon that comes, and she uses that element very much in her part.
How would you differentiate when you do a feature film and a series like this? Because this could also be a film, but I'm actually very happy that it's a TV series because there's more to enjoy of it as well.
So am I. I'm also very happy. Look, it's very exciting for me to do 6 parts. It's very exciting because it gives space for other characters to actually really breathe and be very meaningful. Do I want to make a movie again? I do, but I'm much more concerned about the right story, the right character, the right setting, than I am concerned about whether it's 2 hours or 6 hours. I treat a TV series the same way I treat a feature film.
And, you know, finally, just coming back to the topic of comedy and lightness, but also we all like a murder mystery. I mean, what's the appeal? We all love it.
I love it too.
Yeah.
I love it. I think all my work, whatever it's been, there's always a lot of tension there. And that works very well for murder mystery because you want to keep the tension and you want to kind of tell audience just so much that maybe they think they know, but also not more than they anticipate that they don't know. And it's that fine dance which is so exhilarating for a director.
Somebody died. And somebody's guilty.
That was Susanne Bier there. Fernando Augusto Pacheco was asking the questions. And The Perfect Couple is out now on Netflix. James Comey is currently an up-and-coming author of crime fiction. But in his previous life, Comey was a public prosecutor and the former director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He was sacked by Donald Trump in 2017, less than 4 years into his 10-year term. He then turned his hand to writing with his first novel, a legal thriller entitled Central Park West, coming out in 2023. On the release of his second novel, Westport, Comey spoke with Monocle's Andrew Muller about his career and transition to becoming a fiction author.
About 2 years ago, after much nudging and pushing by the editor of my second nonfiction book, which nobody read because it came out the week of January 6th. Good time to launch a book about the justice system in America. But he kept referring to parts of the book as scenes, this scene and that scene. And I kept saying, look, man, it's my life. It's not a scene. And he said, yeah, but you write narrative well, you write dialogue well, you should really try fiction. And I resisted. And luckily he kept after me and offered to pair me with someone, and I rejected that. And then he said, you really should just try it. And I tried it and found it harder than nonfiction, but addictive. And now it's what I want to do when I grow up.
So there wasn't a background in reading this stuff for you. You hadn't sort of whiled away the off hours as you were coming up as a prosecutor with Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, Elmore Leonard, or anybody like that?
No, the last crime fiction or thriller I remember reading was 1987, when Scott Turow's Presumed Innocent came out just before I became a prosecutor. And thereafter, I just couldn't, in my leisure time, read about crime or terrorism or espionage because it was filling my life.
Or is it that thing? And I was wondering if it's something you're maybe trying to correct with the novels of, obviously, if you've been a prosecutor and then if you've worked for the FBI, those are two fields which are repeatedly mythologized in literature and cinema. Is there that frustration? Because I sure as heck get it with fictional depictions of journalism. You watch it and just go, that's not right. None of this is how anything works.
Right. You're much more attractive than the mythical journalists. I found that with television, that I couldn't watch it because they were so often picturing the FBI director jumping out of a helicopter to rescue somebody when the FBI director is behind a desk. So that wasn't the reason I stayed away from the reading of it. I think that kept me away from the visual depictions.
But stop me if this is a reach. Is there nevertheless a commonality, certainly between the prosecutor's job and the crime writer's job? You are both trying to tell a convincing story that's going to persuade people, right?
Yes, and I think also, without making it sound like it's crass, I would say, an entertaining and holding attention. I mean, the job of a trial lawyer is to take a set of facts, synthesize it, organize it, and then communicate it in a way that holds the fact finder's attention.
Do you feel a bit more liberated, though, writing a novel? You can obviously just make things up. Is it easier to, if you're having difficulty getting from one scene to another, just to think, well, I can just insert something there, which I'm pretty sure is something prosecutors aren't supposed to do?
That's right. If you're stuck, you could make the guy left-handed to solve a problem. I actually found that to be what made fiction harder than nonfiction, though, because yes, you can make things up, but you also have to make things up and then keep it on track, keep it consistent. With nonfiction, all I had to do was remember what had happened and recount it accurately. Fiction, I have to keep tone and character online and consistent and entertaining.
This is something else I was wondering about, though, because you will be unsurprised to learn that I do plan to ask you a few questions about your association with one of the world's more legendary fibbers. But I keep coming back to that line that often credited to Mark Twain, although, like most things credited to Mark Twain, he may never have actually said it, that one of the best reasons to tell the truth is that it's just easier to remember.
You know, there's something to that. And again, I don't know whether Churchill also appears to have said a lot of things he didn't say, and Twain the same, but there's truth in that when I wrote about my experiences with Donald Trump, I had written memos at the time. So what I needed to go back and do was read the memo and summarize it or quote it accurately. And that's what makes nonfiction easier.
You mentioned earlier your time as a prosecutor putting away the Gambinos. When you're up against a formidable enemy like that, do any thoughts of that sort actually enter your head about the personal risks you are yourself running?
No. I know that will sound strange to listeners, but one of the few good things about Cosa Nostra in America is that during the induction ceremony, they make all new members promise not to harm law enforcement. And that isn't about some moral commitment. It's about practicality. The people I worried about most were the criminals who were too stupid to know that it wasn't in their interest to harm me both because of the state's power and because there's 1,000 people behind me. I am replaceable in the extreme. Those people concerned me, and I've had threats from those kind of people over the years.
You have drawn the comparison before, and the reason I'm asking about it is because we may, as a world, be confronted with it again from November, depending on the decision your fellow citizens make. But do you think that analogy does stand up, perhaps not so much for the last Trump administration, but for the potential next Trump administration? Are you concerned that it will be basically that?
Yes, although as the president, if Donald Trump, God forbid, became president again, he will still be dumb and amoral and have a tiny attention span, but he will be surrounded by people who are at the bottom of the barrel with him, but smarter. And so we were aided, without knowing it, that he didn't have our all-stars last time around him, but he had enough people of talent with some shred of morality that they would try and deceive him or cajole him or rope-a-dope him so he forgot what he wanted them to do. Those people will not be in the next Trump administration. He'll have only the very bottom of the barrel, some of whom are quite capable.
Because you have had the experience, and I think it is an instructive one, and I do kind of wish it was possible to transmit it to more Americans as to what's that like. You have been in the room with Donald Trump when he was attempting to do president stuff. Is there a way you can describe what that's like?
It's like trying to communicate with a child. And that's hard for people to believe because the office itself carries with it this sense that it must be a person of gravitas. But to tell Donald Trump something important, you have to interrupt him because he wants to talk about what he wants to talk about, and it's about himself. And so intelligence briefers or FBI directors, to communicate with him, need to find a way to break through that torrent of self-referential babble and hold his attention with colorful diagrams. Or I remember going to brief him on a horrifying threat, and I brought things to show him so I could hold them up and let him touch them. And Barack Obama would not have stood for that. But you just have to understand your audience. Elementary school teachers learn to communicate in a way that holds the attention of people who want to pick their nose and go to the bathroom.
James Comey there in conversation with Monocle's Andrew Muller. And Comey's novel, Westport, is available now. You're back with a very special edition of The Briefing on Monocle Radio, with me, Tom Edwards. Lisa Jackson is the VP of Environment, Policy and Social Initiatives at a small tech company you might just have heard of called Apple. Following a long career in sustainability leadership, including an impressive 4-year stint leading the EPA in the Obama administration, Lisa made the leap from public service to the private sector. She stopped by Midori House to talk to me about the company's environmental achievements, the opportunities to drive change, and why fostering an entrepreneurial atmosphere in one of the world's biggest corporates is so important.
When I first got to Apple, we decided to really focus our work, very consistent with Apple's motto of focus and simplify. So we focus on climate change, and we focus on the impact of our company and our suppliers on climate change. So let's talk about our company. Since 2018, we've run on 100% renewable energy all across the company. So every store, every office, every data center that's an Apple data center, those are all running on renewable energy because that's our first goal here is to make sure our footprint is zero and is that we are carbon neutral, if you will. And then to move on to our suppliers. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of suppliers, but 320 of them so far have committed to use only renewable energy when they're manufacturing Apple products. That's 16 gigawatts of clean energy that has to come onto grids, new energy, in order to support our manufacturers. In fact, Apple as a company has been carbon neutral since 2020. We've run on clean energy since 2018. And so looking forward, by 2030, we want all of our suppliers to do exactly what we do, run on clean energy for their Apple production. And we want every time one of our users plugs in our product, there's clean energy being added to the grid to cover her or his energy loads. So even charging your product is carbon free.
And talk to me about the complexities of navigating those supply chain challenges, because people will know whether you're looking at manufacture, sourcing of raw materials, assembly, whatever it might be, it necessarily involves delegating or divesting a lot of that ultimate responsibility to other, how can we say it discreetly, less engaged or less well-disposed stakeholders. Presumably your work in government is super helpful in trying to draw those people in, at the very least, to join the conversation, hopefully then to demonstrate some action. But how much of a challenge is that?
You know what? Collaboration is everything. First, internally, let's just look inside Apple. You know, my team at Apple is pretty small. When you look at my remit, it's not just environment. We do public policy. We do some other social initiatives, which we can talk about another time. But we had to find a way to bring Apple together around this idea of the environment. And so that's our operations team. When you talk about supply chain at Apple, you're talking about the operations side of the business. It is mighty and formidable, and they do work really, really closely with these suppliers in order to make the products to the specs that we want, that our customers expect, the quality that they expect. And so it was adding another thing onto their list of things to insist on. So now we insist that our suppliers, in order to do business with us, they have to commit to using clean energy for all their production by 2030, which is the goal we set for ourselves back in 2020. So yeah, it is all about collaboration. And it's also about realizing that you don't have the answer. Inside the company, it does feel a bit like we run this little shop whose job it is to go find the experts, whether it's in design, product engineering, operations, even marketing, so that we can bring together a story that's true and authentic that we can tell people about our commitment to the environment.
Just to sort of double back on your former work, you've got a brief that it necessitates a long-term view, and you've got the backing and the clout of a business that's made deep and significant investment to deliver to that. Yeah. If we come to the public sector, often we are in the grip of short-termism, understandably politically. You alluded to it earlier. You know, people get booted out after 4 years. Where you have that inbuilt short-termism politically, I don't know, is that a source of frustration? Because sometimes you're going to start a conversation, 18 months later, that whole team is gone and you're back to square one. I mean, does it mean that it becomes increasingly incumbent on leaders in the private sector to actually deliver for the wider public, not just their consumers? Is that okay if that is the way that it's used sometimes?
I think it has to be. When I was a regulator, I looked for leadership companies, businesses, who would come in and say, look, we're already doing the minimum. We're meeting your regulation, but we see a business opportunity to do more. So what we're doing at Apple, I hope, is a ripple in the pond for other businesses to look and say, hey, we are using recycled materials. We've made a market for recycled materials, recycled tin, recycled copper, recycled aluminum, of course, recycled gold in devices. You know, the MacBook Air we shipped not too long ago is 50% recycled by weight. So, yeah, you need these beacons, these lighthouses, whatever metaphor we want to use, that show that it can not only be done, but it can be done successfully in business. Since 2015, our carbon footprint is down 55%. Since 2015, our revenues are up 60+%. So we've broken the chain of production and carbon emissions. Production going up, carbon emissions going down. Those are the kinds of tentpoles we need to see.
And that's a critical narrative, the idea that doing good costs. We have to turn that narrative around. Yeah.
That feeling in our head. We were taught it somehow innately. If something's good, it must be expensive. And if something's good, it must require work and sacrifice. And in this case, we have to think about the circular economy. We have to think about recycling. As people who use devices, we have to bring them back because we need to realize that eases the load on the planet. And we need to think about energy and water use.
That was Apple's Lisa Jackson talking to me earlier. Finally on today's programme, one of the films of the year was undoubtedly the sci-fi blockbuster Dune Part 2. The epic visual storytelling of the movie is more than matched by its otherworldly soundtrack, and the man responsible is legendary German film score composer and music producer Hans Zimmer. Here, Hans Zimmer talks to Monocle's Robert Bound about the first time Dune director Denis Villeneuve floated the idea of working together on the film.
We were at Warner Brothers, and we were standing on the Warner Brothers lot, and I think we were waiting for a car or something. And he very quietly says to me, have I ever heard of a book called Dune? And I think, like these little dogs that get really excited and sort of jump up and down. I think I became one of those, and I think I scared.
He threw you a bone, right?
Yeah, I scared him a little bit, with my enthusiasm and, that I really, really, really knew the book. Yeah. So in fact, we were talking about this earlier. he on purpose never showed me the script because he wanted me to retain the purity of knowing the book, and never being influenced by by
so you're kind of
work.
you're going back to the original text and your ideas.
I was the as the pretentious musician would call it, the urtext.
I like that. Though. I like that. Yeah. What's and so did you react to rushes? Did you didn't read the script until right at the end of the process, because it's a very organic thing, isn't it?
Well, the first one, when we were we started, and then COVID hit, and so suddenly things became.
Did you have too many or not enough ideas when COVID hit? I wonder. I expect it's the former.
No. All right. So suddenly my studio moved into my sitting room, and which is right next to my daughter's bedroom. And sometimes at like 5:30 in the morning, she'd be like coming and going, "Daddy, do you think you could just play something else and a little quieter? I have exams today, But the score is basically my band, the band I tour with, the band I love, the people so it's not obviously not an orchestral score. I always thought that was my 13-year-old teenage arrogance always went, why am I hearing an orchestra when I'm in space? So,
right.
It's like isn't that all wrong? So we build instruments. I mean, I have a friend.
Kubrick's got a lot to answer for with choosing.
The Blue Danube, and I know, but God, did he give us a gift?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting because obviously,
in space, no one can hear you play anything.
I know, no, but obviously, I thought a lot about Kubrick in 2001. Not so much for this film, but for Interstellar, for instance. And actually, you saying this just now at this very moment suddenly makes me go, you know what I think he did, why he picked that music, because he needed to figure out how to show a real human element within his story.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, this film, or look at, what we did. I mean, we finished the first film and I just carried on writing, knowing...
So I understand. Now, this is great. I love the infectious, let's call it Hans Zimmer's infectious enthusiasm. You can't turn off the tap.
I can't turn off the tap. And we weren't greenlit, right? So it's just, like tenacity. It's like, okay,
they get that for free, right?
I know they're going to let us make the next movie. So I kept on writing. And as Denis will tell you, like 6 months in, he phones me and he goes, the movie has been out for 6 months. You can stop now. And I'm going, no. And so there's this one piece which was written in that time that I would open our set with when we were touring. So all, I mean, look, I don't know if you came to and saw us at the O2, or, like people in Europe.
Yeah.
Many people in Europe heard this piece not knowing what it was, because I always had this idea that they'd come and see the movie and they'd go, I felt this once before.
Yeah, right.
It's not even like you recognize it, but you sort of had that feeling once.
You've got a sort of strange, there's that thing of déjà vu before it's even happened.
Exactly.
Right? You've got a muscle memory. You don't know where it comes from.
Right.
So you built it, and they will come. Essentially.
Exactly. So I wanted to play with that idea, and I mean, the score is pretty abstract. It's pretty abrasive in places. It's not cuddly. But then you suddenly get that moment of very pure and beautiful playing by my friend Pedro Eustache. And there's real beauty in that playing.
That was celebrated film score composer and music producer Hans Zimmer talking to our Robert Bound. And that's all for this special edition of The Briefing. The programme was produced by Jack Dewars. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow, but from me, Tom Edwards, it's goodbye, and thanks for listening.